Hey everybody, Robert here from blackbeltgaming, continuing to read through Adventures Dark and Deep. We're heading into the subclass of Cavalier called the Paladin. And of course I'm familiar with the Paladin as its own distinct class in 1st edition AD&D, but I do believe it was an unearthed arcana that the Cavalier came out, and then Paladin became a subclass of Cavalier. I don't think our group really, I can't remember really anyone playing a Cavalier, and I think we just kind of kept things as they were. We didn't play a lot of Unearthed Arcana, but let's take a look at Adventures Dark and Deep and how the Paladin is designed. Strength 14, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 13, Dexterity 14, Con 14, and Charisma 17. You need to have some very good stats to be a paladin. Humans are allowed to be paladins, so we don't see any of the centaurs or the other half races or anything like that. You need to be a human. A D10 for hit points. You also need to be lawful good. Weapons and armor. An interesting note here is metal shields. And you can have any weapon and any armor, but I kind of looked in the equipment section and I didn't exactly see metal shields. So let me take you there. So I'm not going to go through all of the equipment, but let's look at some of the prices of the armor. And I'll try to pronounce some of these as best I can. But we have Brigandine, Buckler. So I think if we're talking Buckler, maybe that's, weren't those metal? I'm not sure. But I don't see, I used to see in the old 1st edition AD&D Player's Handbook, like a small wooden shield. But here I see large and medium shields, and then bucklers. And I'm not really sure what assumption to make here. What exactly are we calling a metal shield? And let me continue. All right, let's take a look here in the shield section. Carrying a shield improves your armor class by 1. We have the small buckler, 1 opponent, medium, 2 opponents per round, large, 3 opponents per round. So you can use this +1 to armor class against that many opponents. So if you're attacked by 4 opponents, it's not going to help you. And there are some other situations here where if you're attacked from the flank or the rear, you're not going to get your shield bonus to your armor class. I believe this is pronounced Pavis. This is a very large shield that is intended to be set into the ground rather than moved around. So it's almost like a portable wall, and it gives you, it's probably good for crossbowmen and things like that. So it gives you about a 90% protection against normal missiles. So it's good to use when you're kind of going up archer to archer and trying to make some attacks there. So it's very cumbersome and is rarely seen outside of a siege. So I still don't really see anything clearly explained as a metal shield. And perhaps I would just assume that when we talk about the Cavaliers and Paladins needing to have a metal shield, I would probably just assume it would be a medium or large shield. So maybe I wouldn't count a buckler. I don't think I've ever seen a knight in shining armor with a little buckler. So maybe that's what that means. Maybe you need the medium or the large shield. That's my guess. So back to the Paladin here. Metal shields, and they have armor restrictions, code of chivalry, and poverty. We'll get through all of these as we go through. Just remember that I think similar to the basic Cavalier that we talked about, I think they're always going to choose the best armor type, despite any magical bonuses or anything associated with magical set of armor. So if there was magic leather armor, the Paladin would probably choose the of course, the plate mail or the mail armor, like chainmail instead. So let's continue. The Paladin is a subclass of Cavalier. If the Cavalier is Uther Pendragon, the Paladin is Lancelot. So a paragon of chivalry and martial prowess, absolutely dedicated to the cause of lawful good and inspired by a never-wavering faith therein. Where the Cavalier swears his fealty to a lord, king, or knightly order, the Paladin almost invariably is dedicated to a zealous deity of lawful good alignment. So I know there are some debates and things going along with the Paladin. And I was stating in another video that I think the Paladin in the more modern or more recent editions has moved away from being associated with a deity. And I always remembered back in first edition, my concept of what a Paladin was very much focused on it being a holy knight. Not just a lawful good, someone that just extremely believed in lawful good. I didn't see it like that. And I think that's what it has become. So I think the Paladin now can be dedicated to different alignments. And maybe they've tried to make that so that it's different from a cleric who's more associated with a deity. But here we can see the Paladin, it kind of an extension of first edition AD&D, is, yes, lawful good and very passionate and has, a dedication to being lawful good, but also is dedicated to a deity of the lawful good alignment. So back when we were kids and getting into D&D, we didn't really go through specific gods. We just didn't do that. Maybe we didn't have the books for it or whatever, but we just kind of were assuming that a Paladin was dedicated to a god of goodness and light. Paladins who deviate from the lawful good alignment will become regular Cavaliers. They must also be of the upper class of social standing, and I think I covered that in my previous video about social classes when we were talking about the blackguard. Paladins are able to wear any sort of armor and shield, and they can become proficient in any weapon. But there are some restrictions. Using the weapon proficiencies and all, if they do use a weapon they're not proficient with, they get a -3 penalty to hit. Anyone familiar with first edition AD&D knows about this, the weapon proficiencies. So unlike more basic editions where you were just proficient in all the weapons in this type, fighters could use anything without penalty. In first edition, you needed to select which weapons you were particularly trained in. Paladins will not use flaming oil, except in a siege situation. They consider it to be cowardly. Here's their experience point progression, a D10 of hit points per level. And their armor is one of their most valued possessions, and they'll always seek to wear the most elaborate armor available. They won't wear leather armor or padded armor under any circumstances, and they'll even pass up enchanted armor of a lesser type in favor of a better armor, more befitting his station. So we talked about that before. They might skip over the chainmail +3 and instead wear their plate mail. So let's go up here. We're getting into their code of chivalry and poverty. And they try to uphold the ideas of glory in battle, honor, faith, courtesy, courage, selflessness, pride, hospitality, generosity, poverty, and loyalty. I think we read some of this with the Cavalier. They need to provide food and lodging for other Paladins, need to display their coat of arms, go to any length to retrieve their standard if it is lost, show respect for their peers, honor their betters, and scorn the ignoble. Paladins take a vow of poverty. The Paladin may never own more than 10 magical items in total, and among these may never have more than 1 suit of enchanted armor, 1 magic shield, 4 magic weapons, and 4 magical items of other sorts, rings, cloaks, rods, etc. They also have to tithe a full 10% of all their treasure gained to his church or temple. Again, we're seeing this connection to a deity and to some religion. As a rule, he will never retain more wealth than is necessary to live modestly, pay his hirelings and henchmen, construct a castle, and such. In addition, I guess you could say again, kind of the curse towards selfless bravery lends the Paladin to recklessness in battle. So they might go charging in against a horde of orcs, and a Paladin will charge the enemy and attempt to secure renown for himself. Enemies will be charged in the following order. Powerful monster champions will be at the top of the list. Enemy leaders, enemy cavaliers, elite cavalry, and it just goes on down the list. Paladins are paragons of the lawful good philosophy. They will only knowingly hire henchmen of lawful good alignment and will only associate on a long-term basis with other characters and beings of good alignment. They will never willingly associate with evil characters or creatures and will only do so with those of neutral alignment on a one-shot basis, and then only if the specific cause of lawful good is to be advanced in the process. If they ever commit an evil act or a chaotic act here, Paladins will be absolved. They must be absolved by a cleric of their religion of no less than 7th level. And there may be some penance to be performed as well. So I know from Paladins from 1st edition, all of these years, there's a lot of people who want to tell you how you should act as a lawful good Paladin, and they'll always say, well, you wouldn't do that because, or you can't do that because. So take a look at some of Gary's advice on this and what Paladins would and wouldn't do, and I think there's some interesting articles out there that give you some better advice on how to play a lawful good Paladin. I think it was around 4th edition, perhaps, or so, they started to refer to Paladins as lawful stupid. And so that's a misunderstanding, I think. Healing. In addition to being immune to all diseases, Paladins may lay hands on someone and thereby heal 2 hit points of damage per Paladin level. This can be done once per day. They can also cure disease once a week for every 5 levels of experience. Horsemanship. Like Cavaliers, they are born to the saddle and are excellent horsemen. They begin the game with 1 skill in horsemanship. And we started to read a bit about skills in one of my previous videos. At 4th level, the Paladin may summon his mount through the special long day rite of fasting and prayer. Magically, the Paladin steed will appear, and I guess it's in the bestiary. Armor class 5, move 180, intelligence 9, and this can only be summoned once in a decade. Interesting. If the mount should be lost, the Paladin must wait a full 10 years to do so again. Paladins do get the multiple attacks per round, so again, kind of like the old fighters used to. When facing opponents with a d4 or d6 hit dice, the Paladin gets a number of attacks equal to his level. However, if they gain more than 1 hit die or if they have a higher hit die type, they don't get this massive bonus. So, special immunities. Paladins are immune to fear and radiate a similar sphere of protection from fear in a 10-foot radius. They are 90% resistant to magic that affects their mind, such as illusions, beguiling, charm, hold, sleep, suggestion, etc. And they gain a +2 bonus on saving throws versus illusions. So I think we already stated Paladins are immune to all disease, and they may detect evil at a 60-foot range. It does require concentration. They also radiate a protection from evil at a 10-foot range as per the spell. Starting equipment, this can depend on your class. So if you're in the lower upper class, middle upper class, or upper class, it might affect how much gold you begin with and what type of equipment. Paladins can learn to wield any sort of weapon, but they usually favor things like lances and swords and things like this. So they will use the following in preference to any other. So they're going to prefer their lance, their swords like longsword, broadsword, bastard swords, and then short swords. Then they'll go to their maces, the horseman's and horseman's mace, horseman's flail, military pick, dagger, scimitar, and javelin. Weapons such as polearms, bows, and two-handed swords are seen as cowardly, and their use, while not forbidden, does violate the code of chivalry of the paladin. Interesting that the two-handed sword is seen as cowardly. I can get the bows, and even to some extent the polearms, but a little surprised by the two-handed swords. Wonder if the author or if any of you have any comments about that. That's just a bit of a surprise to me there. I don't remember that. That could be in the old book I have on the shelf from first edition, but I just don't remember that. Paladins must choose the lance as one of their weapons at first level, and they gain a bonus of 2 hit with certain weapons. So as they level up, they may get bonuses with their lances and swords and things like this. So continuing the first edition AD&D tradition with fighters and the subclasses, and here obviously with the Cavalier and its subclasses, they get multiple attacks. So levels 1 to 6, they attack once per round, but starting at level 7, they can attack 3 times every 2 rounds. And we're going to talk about the combat soon, but they're going to get those bonuses like fighters and its subclasses used to in the old player's handbook. Also, beginning at 3rd level, paladins are able to turn certain types of creatures, undead creatures, and some extraplanar creatures, and lesser, such as lesser angels and minor devils, and certain creatures in the Adventures Dark and Deep Bestiary. So you display your paladin's holy symbol. There we go again. Paladins are tied to a holy order, and they're going to present forth their holy symbol and command the undead in question to flee. So we have their ability to turn undead, and turning undead, I think I'm going to get more into that with clerics, but it looks like we're doing a d20 here. Yeah, it's explained right here. If the roll on a d20 is equal to or greater than the number indicated, the paladin has successfully turned the undead in question. If the first attempt fails, the same paladin cannot make another with the same undead until he gains a new level. Wow. Undead that are turned will flee for 3 to 12 rounds. If there's a 0 indicated, turning is automatic. So paladin of level 7 can automatically turn certain creature types of 1, 2, 3 automatically. Let's move on up just a bit more. Usually 1 to 12 creatures will be affected by a successful turning attempt. A double asterisk, can't pronounce it, indicates that 7 to 12 creatures will be so affected. I guess a double is going to mean it's not merely turned, but actually turns to dust. Interesting. It's like disintegrated. And the requirement for a place for the undead to flee obviously does not apply in such a circumstance. Retainers. Paladins are required to gain retainers as they increase in level. I think we saw this with the Blackguard as well. Level 4, we're starting to gain followers that are Cavaliers or Paladins. And this continues to go up. And then around the time of level 8, you get 2 to 12 mounted men-at-arms. And they will usually follow a Paladin without pay, other than just standard upkeep and training. At all times, the Paladin is responsible for his retainers living up to the Paladin's chivalric code and his strict interpretation of the lawful good philosophy. These retainers are counted as henchmen. So here we have spellcasting, but it doesn't begin until level 9. So once a Paladin reaches level 9, they can cast some clerical spells. I think we saw with the Blackguard it was magic user spells, so that was an interesting difference. Spells are committed to memory by the Paladin before they can be cast, and they have to be rested and go through the prayers necessary to have the magical energies in their mind. Spells are not granted to the Paladin directly by his deity. So let's see, spells are not granted to the Paladin directly by his deity. Spells of less than 3rd level are gained through contemplation and meditation. Spells from 3rd through 4th levels are bestowed upon the Paladin by the servitors of his deity. These could be beings such as angels and so forth up to demigods. So maybe we're not wanting to outdo the cleric, although I need to read a bit more about the cleric, which I think is coming up next. Naturally, paladins must remain dedicated and faithful to their gods, especially when attempting to receive higher level spells. The game master will need to make the actual determination as to whether the character has or has not been faithful to his religion. So again, I think the more modern versions of the game have dropped religion from the paladin. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what I started to see. However, if he's not been, let's see, sorry, I interrupted myself. The game master will need to make the actual determination as to whether the character has or has not been faithful to the religion. But if not, the character can expect to spend 2 to 8 days in prayer and fasting, as well as performing some sort of atoning sacrifice. Further transgressions could result in the paladin being ousted from the community of the faithful, as well as losing his status as a paladin. The exact details will be up to the game master. Well, there we have it. We have read about the paladin, and we're going to be heading into the cleric next.